Oh, that's okay. No problem.
We couldn't remember
Yeah.
exactly where he wrapped up. So.
Great.
For thunder of the captain, not less the Wessex line, leaned back and reeled a spear to rear, as elf charged with the Rhine-made spear, and roaring like the Rhine. For the men were borne by the waving walls of woods and clouds that pass, by dizzy plain and drifting sea, and they mixed God with glamoury, God with the gods of the burning tree, and the wizard's tower and glass. But Mark was come of the glittering towns where hot white details show, where man can number and expound, and his faith grew in a hard ground of doubt and reason and falsehood found, where no faith else could grow. Belief that grew of all beliefs one moment back was blown, and belief that stood on unbelief stood up iron and alone. The Wessex crescent backwards crushed, as with bloody spear, went elf roaring and routing, and Mark against elf yet shouting, shocked in his mid-career. Right on the Roman shield and sword did spear of the Rhine-maids run, but the shield shifted never, the sword rang down to sever. The great Rhine sang forever, and the songs of elf were done. And a great thunder of Christian men went up against the sky, saying, God hath broken the evil spear, ere the good man's blood was dry. Spears at the charge, yelled Mark amain, death on the gods of death. Over the thrones of doom and blood goeth God that is a craftsman good, and gold and iron, earth and wood, loveth and laboureth. The fruits leap up in all your farms, the lamps in each abode, God of all good things done on earth, all wheels or webs of any worth, the God that makes the roof girth, the God that makes the road. The God that heweth kings in oak, writeth songs on vellum, God of gold and flaming glass, confregit potentias, arcuum scutum gorleas, gladium et bellum. Steel and lightning broke about him, battle bays and palm. All the sea kings swayed among woods of the Wessex arms upflung, the trumpet of the Roman tongue, the thunder of the psalm. And midmost of that rolling field ran Ogier ragingly, lashing at Mark, who turned his blow and brake the helm about his brow and broke him to his knee. Then Ogier heaved over his head his huge round shield of proof. But Mark set one foot on the shield, and on some sundered rock appealed, and towered above the tossing field, a statue on a roof. Dealing far blows about the fight, like thunderbolts aroam, like birds about the battlefield, while Ogier writhed under his shield, like a tortoise in his dome. But hate in the buried Ogier went strong as pain in hell. With bare brute hand from the inside, he burst the shield of brass and hide, and a death stroke to the Roman side sent suddenly and well. Then the great statue on the shield looked his last look around, with level and imperial eye, and Mark, the man from Italy, fell in the sea of agony and died without a sound. And Ogier, leaping up alive, hurled his huge shield away, flying as when a juggler flings a whizzing plate in play, and held to arms up rigidly and roared to all the Danes, Fallen is Rome, yea fallen, the city of the plains. Shall no man born remember, that breaketh wood or wield, how long she stood on the roof of the world, as he stood on my shield. The new wild world forgetteth her, as foam fades on the sea, how long she stood with her foot on man, as he with his foot on me. No more shall the brown men of the south move like the ants in lines, to quiet men with olives, or madden men with vines. No more shall the white towns of the south, where Tiber and Nilus run, sitting around a secret sea, worship the secret sun. The blind gods roar for Rome fallen, and Forum and Garland gone, for the ice of the north is broken, and the sea of the north comes on. The blind gods roar and rave and dream of all cities under the sea, for the heart of the north is broken, and the blood of the north is free. Down from the dome of the world we come, rivers on rivers down. Under us swirl the sects and hordes, and the high dooms we drown. Down from the dome of the world and down, struck flying as a skiff. On a river in spate is spun and swirled, until we come to the end of the world that breaks short like a cliff. And when we come to the end of the world, for me I count it fit to take the leap like a good river, shot shrieking over it. But whatso hap at the end of the world, where nothing is struck in sounds, it is not by Thor these monkish men, these humbled Wessex hounds. Not this pale line of Christian hinds, this one white string of men, shall keep us back from the end of the world and the things that happen then. It is not Alfred's dwarfish sword, nor Egbert's pygmy crown, shall stay us now that descend in thunder, rending the realms and the realms thereunder, down through the world and down. There was that in the wild man back of him, there was that in his own wild song, a dizzy throbbing, a drunkard smoke, that dazed to death all Wessex folk, and swept their spears along. Vainly the sword of Colin and the axe of Alfred plied. The Danes poured in like a brainless plague, and knew not when they died. Prince Colin slew a score of them, and was stricken to his knee. King Alfred slew 67, and was borne back on a tree. Back to the black gate of the woods, back up the single way, back by the place of the parting ways, Christ's knights were whirled away. And when they came to the parting ways, doom's heaviest hammer fell, for the king was beaten, blind at bay, down the right lane with his array, but Colin swept the other way, where he smote great strokes and fell. The thornwoods over Ethandune stand sharp and thick as spears, by night and furs and forest harms, far sundered were the friends in arms. The loud lost blows, the last alarms, came not to Alfred's ears. The thornwoods over Ethandune stand stiff as spikes in mail. As to the hot king came at morn, dead Roland on a doubtful horn, seemed unto Alfred lightly born, the last cry of the gale.
Hey, that was great. Good job, Maria. All right, you have some thoughts?
That one guy talks a lot. Ogier. It was sad.
Yeah. Poor
I thought
Mark.
it was, yeah. I thought it was interesting because Ogier talks a lot about, like, you know, how Mark, like, really symbolizes, like, Rome and, like, that civilization, and they're wanting to, like, tear that down and wipe the memory of, like, Rome from the earth.
Yeah.
I was also kind of curious, and maybe this is a little bit of a stretch, but right before that, there's this image of, you know, Mark standing like a statue on this rock and on Ogier's shield. I was wondering if there's some kind of, like, analogy in that of, like, you have this image where he's, like, standing above the battlefield, and it looks like he's at this, like, height of, like, prowess and stability, but he hasn't completely, like, subdued this, like, savagery that he's standing on.
Yeah.
And it comes back and, like, tears everything down. So I don't know if there's,
Yeah, that's great, Maria.
a message there about having, like, the diligence to really, like, root out these evils that can creep underneath civilization.
Yeah. No, that's excellent. And I think we're also reminded a couple of times in here that this is God's war, not ours. Right? So the whole not this pale line of Christian hinds, this one white string of men shall keep us back from the end of the world and the things that happen then. It's pretty amazing to think about that language. But we're definitely seeing these guys fall, right? One after another. Because we had a death, right? For you, Nathaniel, we had a death, and now we've got another death. And so, yeah, these guys are falling pretty quickly. But they're doing great stuff as they do it. And I love the whole counting, right? How many did these guys kill, right? So a score plus 7, right? King Alfred, and was borne back on a tree, right? It sounds very much like Gimli and Legolas in the Lord of the Rings, right? As they're counting how many they've killed. Pretty wild. Anybody else have thoughts on this?
I mean,
Drew, please.
Definitely a callback to the first chapter that I tell you not for your comfort, yea, not for your desires, save that the sky grows darker yet and the sea rises higher.
Yeah.
This is when he went to the chiefs, this is what he promised them, and now I'm seeing that play out.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. In the word of Mary, the word of the world's desire. Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Well, we're getting really close to the end, guys. So, and we've just got the 2 books left. So, Maria, are you going to be ready on Tuesday? That's great. And when, do you guys remember, what day are we doing Canonical for Leibowitz? I think that's next week, isn't it? Let me, nobody knows right offhand. Let me look it up real quick, because we need to figure that out. Have you guys been reading it?
Here, I can see, I've got my syllabus right here.
Oh, you've got it right there?
Yeah.
Okay.
You had it as the 16th, so is that next Thursday?
That's
1
next-
week from today, yeah.
Yeah, next Thursday. Yeah, good. So hopefully that'll give you guys enough time to read that too. It's a pretty fast read. Especially book 1 and book 3 are really fast. I do want to warn you guys, I think I've mentioned this a little bit about Canticle. I love it. I don't know how many times I've read it now. It's either the most anti-Catholic novel I've ever read or the most pro-Catholic novel I've ever read, and I'm just honestly not sure. And every time I read it, I mean, partly it's so funny, but it's dark humor. It's not laugh, ha-ha, out loud kind of humor. It's, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened kind of humor. So just look for that and try and think about what Miller is saying, what he's trying to do. But I want to warn you guys, if you haven't, has anybody finished it yet? I'm assuming not, but no problem. I wouldn't expect you guys to have yet. But there's this I don't know how to describe it. There's a very disturbing scene in book 3 so you guys at least know the premise. This is, it takes place 600 years, then 1200 years, then 1800 years after a nuclear war. And so one of the great questions is, the radiation has mutated, not everybody by any means, but there are definite humans who've been mutated. And so in the last story, because it's 3 stories of the same monastery, but 3 stories. And in the last story, there's a woman that you don't know if she's kind of mentally deficient. It's hard to tell. She's kind of like a street lady, but her name is Mrs. Grails, which I think is an Arthurian reference, I would assume. And you guys can disagree with that. I'll be really curious to know what you make of it. But she has a second head that is more, so she would be like my age, but her head is a baby. And it's basically, it's the key to the whole novel. So, but I don't have an answer to it. I wish I did. I wish I could, but I think it's the key to the novel. So you guys just kind of think about that, what's going on with that. But it'll make more sense when you get there. I know right now in the abstract it just sounds weird, but when you get there, it'll somewhat make sense. But the priests don't even know what to do with her. It's just this kind of wild. And the rule, and I love this, the rule is, because you've got all these radiated people who've mutated, the rule is if you're born of woman, you have the possibility of going to heaven. That's what they rule at the time. So you've got these interesting creatures. Anyway, I think you guys will love it. I love it. I just reread it last week, and I couldn't put it down again, even though I knew exactly what was coming. I just was so into it. So, okay. Well, look, guys. Let's go ahead and let's turn to T.S. Eliot, our second of the Four Quartets. And I'm going to give you guys just a little bit of an introduction here. This is East Coker, right? And it's just a little bit longer than Bert Norton. We know some things about this. Eliot did not like talking about his poetry afterwards. We have hints, especially little interviews here and there, snippets. He didn't like to explain his symbolism. But on this one, we actually have some explicit dialogue from Eliot, explanation, I should say, not dialogue, but explanation about what East Coker is about. So we know this. This is, remember, the first of the Four Quartets is about air. This one is about earth, right? And that'll be pretty obvious with the colors, everything that we have. The dry salvages will be about water. But so right now in the second one, we're dealing with earth. East Coker is a real village. It's where the Eliots come from in England before they migrate to America. And they are Puritans. That'll be important to the story. They're old-fashioned Puritans who come in the early 1620s. And so they're very early in coming over. And they're of Puritan stock, Remember, by the time Eliot, T.S. Eliot Tom comes along, they've pretty much lost all their faith. That's just old-fashioned crazy stuff from the ancestors. But they're definitely rooted in the old Puritan side. And so that's what East Coker is. So, not surprisingly, East Coker is earthy. And you're going to see some really earthy images in all of this. But this is the most important part. We had talked about this earlier in the semester, but it's been a while, so I'm going to bring it up again. Of all of Eliot's poetry, East Coker is the most philosophical, intentionally philosophical. Eliot has read, someone we've talked about a little bit, but really haven't gone into any great detail about. He has read Christopher Dawson. Dawson, 1889 to 1970. Dawson is truly one of the most important, even though we're not going to spend a ton of time on him, he's one of the most important Christian humanists of the 20th century. Some people would even argue he's the Christian humanist of the 20th century. I would probably say he and Kirk are the two most important, but it doesn't matter. I mean, these are nuances. But Dawson, if you guys know him at all, you might recognize him because he and Tolkien are good friends, and they go to the same parish in Oxford. Tolkien's wife converts to Catholicism at exactly the same time that Dawson converts to Catholicism, all in 1913 and 1914. So an intellectual ascent in 1913, and then actually becoming officially Roman Catholic in 1914. And I want to tell you this about Dawson because I think it's going to help us understand East Coker. Dawson is raised in a really, really interesting family. On his mother's side, they are old money. They own a castle in Wales. That's how prestigious this family is. They own a castle in Wales. There's a great kind of myth about the castle that it was all built in one night by an angry woman. You guys don't need to write that down. It's just kind of a fun story. And Dawson's mother comes from deep, not just money, but also Anglican, so high Anglican bishops, anything you can imagine in the Anglican church. That's what they've been. So they've been very high up in the faith in England. And it's very much expected that Christopher will follow in the footsteps and become an Anglican priest at some point. That's not going to happen, obviously, because he becomes Catholic. But this is what the hope is. His dad is this really interesting guy from York, England. So not Welsh. Did I tell you his mom's Welsh? I don't think I told you that, did I? Right, they're Welsh. His dad is from York. And not from money, but from a really interesting old family. Dawson's dad was famous because he's one of the first British explorers into the heart of Brazil. And he's also one of the first British explorers to go to the Arctic. And so he's a famous, in his own day and age, he's a super famous explorer. And I always love this, he's Anglican, but he's not anti-Catholic at all. In fact, everywhere he goes, he does this intentionally. He does this in the heart of Brazil, in the forest, in the jungle, and he does this in the Arctic. He always creates Dante clubs, and so he carries the Divine Comedy all over the globe with him. And he thinks and I think he is, he's promoting Western civilization. That's part of his British exploring aspect. Christopher doesn't obviously live up to what his mother wants. And when he becomes Catholic, he's not run out of the family, but his mother never really forgives him for this. There will be until she dies, there will be this great tension between his mother and himself. And it's too bad, because remember, his dad's off exploring. Christopher is actually homeschooled by his mother, and his mother is brilliant. It's like one of the most intelligent people I've ever encountered. And she raises Christopher all on mythology and on the stories of the saints. That's where Dawson, along with reading Chesterton, that's what really forms Dawson's imagination. And Dawson, even though he becomes Catholic, he's never anti-Protestant. He's intentionally never anti-Protestant because he knows that's the faith that nourished him and nourished his family for centuries. And so he has a deep respect for the Anglican Church overall, but he loves mythology in every way. You guys remember the story I told you, Bran the Blessed, right? That's Dawson's story. He loved that story of Bran sacrificing himself. In fact, one of Dawson's first articles as a kid, he rewrites the story of Bran the Blessed as an article. Very, very interesting guy. He then gets into Oxford and does extremely well at Oxford. He goes on and he goes to a Swedish or Norwegian university and gets some graduate degrees. But he kind of ends there. And what he does, and this is fascinating, he can do this because he's wealthy. He basically, right after he gets out of college, he spends about 15 years doing nothing but reading. He doesn't have to work. And he's not healthy enough to fight World War I. The draft passes him by because he's in bad health. And he actually, there are parts of him, and I'll get to this in a moment. He suffers from very severe depression and insomnia. And that's kind of important to the story here in a moment. But Dawson has, and I don't know how to explain this, and you guys can either accept the story or not. I'll just tell you what happens. What we think about Dawson is that there were two kind of serious miracles that happen around him and to him. One is 5 years before he becomes Catholic. He's 20 and he visits Rome, and he's there on Easter. So he's there Easter 1909 as a tourist. And, bless you, Nathaniel, he's standing, you guys forgive me, especially if you've been to Rome, you probably know how to pronounce this, and I don't. He's standing at what I would pronounce as the Are Coli. I don't know if that means anything or if I'm even saying it close to what it's called, but it's two words, A-R-E and then C-O-E-L-I. And so he's standing there, and this amazing, it's just, I don't know how to describe it other than it seems like a miracle to me. He is, for one instant, he believes he is shown by God in one instant. He is shown all of human history, all of it. African, Chinese, Latin American, from Adam all the way up to his day, he believes that he's been given this vision. And I always both love and feel sorry for him about this. He already has a kind of depressive personality, but he wants in the worst way to do God's will. And so he believes that this miracle that he's received is God's way of telling him, Christopher, it's your job to write the history of humanity. And he can never, ever live up to that. And so for his whole life, he feels like God has not only blessed him, but has also given him this unconquerable burden. And it leads to all kinds of anxiety, and he can't sleep. And, he's never, as far as I know, he's never hospitalized for his depression, but it's bad. It's really bad. But he's also, and he must have been the nicest guy ever. People just flock to him. Everywhere he goes, there are people who form little communities around him. And so in the late 1920s, he has this group, and you guys remember we've already talked a little bit about the Bloomsbury group that Eliot was a part of. Dawson has this group as well called the Chelsea group that he forms in the 1920s. And this is a whole group of men. Don't think there are women. There may be, but they would not be prominent in this group. but there's this whole group of men that meet, and they get together and they drink and they smoke and they talk and they read to, just like the Inklings will do. They read to each other their articles and their poetry, and they start calling themselves the Order Men. So they don't call themselves Chelsea, even though they're meeting in Chelsea, London. They call themselves the Order Men. And here's what they decide, and they're all young. You know, they're basically just a little bit older than you guys in here. Christopher's the oldest, and then he's got all of these people who kind of follow him everywhere. He's just that kind of character that people love him. And so he has this group, and they meet, and what they decide is that they don't like the Anglican Church because they think the Anglican Church is just too much a part of the establishment. So what they decide, and they almost all convert to Catholicism, what they decide is that the only way to re-energize Western civilization after World War I is to become Catholic. But their argument is ultimately, and I'm going to explain this here in a moment, their argument ultimately is more of an artistic argument than a theological argument. They're fine with the theology of the Catholic Church. That's not, they all accept that. They believe it. But what really drives them is the history of the music of the Catholic Church and the art and the architecture. And so they firmly believe that if you look at Western civilization, it's not Protestantism that's created culture, it's the Catholic Church. Protestants continue it, but they're late in coming to it. And so if there's going to be a real revival of Western civilization, it will have to come from the Catholic Church. But they're just as adamantly against old Catholicism in England as they are positive about young men becoming Catholic. And so their kind of Catholicism is more of almost a jab at the older Catholics of Britain, and basically saying, you guys have gone along to get along because you don't want to be outcasts in society. We're willing to be outcasts in order to make this happen. And so what they do is they start creating, first of all, they create a journal. They create several journals, in fact. And these are journals that are written at a very high level, but they're written for people on the street to pick up. So even though they're written at a very high level, they're for everybody. And so the first journal, not surprisingly, they create is Order. That's their first journal. And then they create one called Colosseum. And it lasts a little bit longer than Order. And then they create one of the most important book series of the 20th century. They create a book series, and it only has 16 volumes, but they're called Essays in Order. And these were books that were meant to be read in an evening. So they're beautiful books, but the whole point is I would sit down after dinner and I would have a good 4 hours, say reading from 6 o'clock until 10 o'clock, and I could read a whole book in that time, and then I go to bed. So the point wasn't to make masterpieces, it was to make really interesting thought pieces. So longer than an article, but shorter than a book. And I've read through most of these. They're really, really good. They're amazingly good. Some of them are truly revolutionary. In fact, one guy who writes goes on to win the Nobel Prize in Literature, not for what he wrote here, but for his other work as well. And what they do, which is really important, in Essays in Order, so this is English, Order is, this is ecumenical, meaning all of Europe, and this Essays in Order is intentionally meant to represent all of Christendom. So they're willing to have Protestants write. It doesn't matter. They're trying, and their argument is, and it's a beautiful argument, as we watch the world, as we watch fascism, as we watch Nazism, as we watch communism, the only thing that can challenge those powers is a return to a fundamental Christianity, but one that is utterly vigorous. So, it's not a problem that I would walk up to somebody on the street and be just blatantly Catholic in front of them, that I would witness that in everything I do. And so they buy a farm called Ditchling. And at Ditchling, they live according to their principles. And their principles are all based on Chesterton's economics called distributivism. And the argument of distributism, I mentioned it to you guys many weeks ago, but the argument of distributism is the exact opposite of Marxism. It's the belief that you want everybody to own property, not a few. So it has some kind of anti-big business tenets to it, but it's really based on more property ownership rather than less. And so that's what they do at the farm. And you guys all know Dr. Schleter, right? Everybody knows Dr. Schleter. His wife, Elizabeth, grew up on a farm here in America based on this farm. So that's where she comes from. And it's it's a kind of farm where not only do you make sure that you're farming, but you go through all the liturgy and you have processions, and it's just utterly Catholic in every aspect. And so that was what Ditchling was. So really interesting experiment in the UK going on. So I hope you guys get this. These guys matter. Right? They're doing really interesting stuff. It's not just me, Brad, lecturing in a classroom. They're living this in every way. And some of the art and poetry that comes out of this movement is to this day just astounding and revolutionary. David Jones, not a name you guys are probably familiar with, but who wrote just poem after poem after poem, and loved Tolkien. Tolkien is on the edge of all of this. He's never a part of it because he's in Oxford, but this is all going on. He's very familiar with it. A guy named Eric Gill, who, again, one of the great artists of the 20th century, just really fascinating people. Chesterton, Belloc, really coming out of this. Okay, so here's what I want to end with as we get into Chesterton, as we get into Eliot. This is the main argument. And again, I gave you guys this a couple of weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago now, but just as a reminder, this is their great claim to originality. Probably something every one of us in this room will accept, but it was revolutionary when they say it. And that is, if we want to understand what moves all things, it is the culture. It is the culture that matters. We have to understand that the root of culture is the cult. We have to understand that. And at the beginning of every cult, not a cult, but a cult, a C-U-L-T, is merely a group of people who worship the same divine. That's what a cult is. And so if we ever want to understand economics or law or art or business, any of these things, or education, we have to recognize that all of these things are downstream from culture, and therefore downstream from the cult. So it's not, in economics, there are natural laws. Right? We're not supply and law of supply and demand. We're not getting around that. That's not cultural. But the way we deal with it is cultural. And so they're not ignoring natural law. They're just saying the way that we understand what these things mean and their implications, that's rooted in the culture. And notice what the implication is. And, think about this. Just think about what we do today. We do this all the time because we're so utterly political. We, not meaning this group, but we Americans will often say things like, well, if we could only get a tax break here, or a subsidy here, or a tariff here, And what these guys would say is that is all superficial. So I'll give you a really hard example. Let's say, and I'm guessing just given this classroom, and you guys can disagree with me, but I'm guessing most of us in this room, if not all of us, are anti-abortion, right? It's just for the sake of argument, I'm assuming that that's true. Here's what this argument would say. Let's imagine, okay, we could start limiting an abortion by maybe giving incentives to women to go ahead and have their baby and to be taken care of for maybe a year after they give birth, right? That could be a way of incentivizing it. Or we could think about, what about the medical profession? Do we want them to have easy access to abortion pills and other things? Those are all quintessential. But what matters most is that we change the opinion of the people. That is, we want women to be at a place where abortion is not even thought of, where it's so foreign, and you can't do that by a law. You can't do that by a tariff or a tax break or a subsidy. You can only do that by changing the culture. And so if those of us in this room, if the seven of us right now, if we really want to stop abortion, it means that we change the minds of everyone around us. We convince them that that is reprehensible. And notice what this means. It could take a century or two before we could do that. So this is a long-term understanding. But if we could truly convince the culture not to have abortion, that's permanent. If we just pass a law, well, that law can be undone. But if we change the culture, that will last for centuries at a time. Does this make sense for everyone? That's the argument these guys are making. So they're not saying, okay, it's totally ineffective to pass a law. They're saying, we'll get the law established if we've changed the minds in culture first. And so the argument is a very depoliticized and very anti-political argument. It argues that real change comes from us loving one another rather than us carrying around signs and demonstrating. Right? That's what it really comes down to. Okay, you guys, does that make sense for everyone? Okay, you don't have to agree with it, but just as long as you understand it. So I would assume that most of us in this room believe that. But again, when these guys make that argument, it's radical. It's really radical because everything has become politicized by the time they make this argument. Okay, you guys ready? Let's start with East Coker. So the reason I wanted to bring Dawson in is because Eliot very intentionally based East Coker on Dawson's theories. So Dawson is very, very influential on Eliot. And Eliot wants to try and put this all together. Okay, you guys have any questions or thoughts? All right, let me jack up the volume here.
East Coker. In my beginning is my end. In succession, houses rise and fall, crumble, are extended, are removed. East Coker.
Oh, sorry, I don't know why I did that.
In my beginning is my end. In succession, houses rise and fall, crumble, are extended, are removed, destroyed, restored, or in their place is an open field or a factory or a bypass. Old stone to new building, old timber to new fires, old fires to ashes, and ashes to the earth, which is already flesh, fur, and feces, bone of man and beast, corn stalk and leaf. Houses live and die. There is a time for building and a time for living and for generation, and a time for the wind to break the loosened pane, and to shake the wainscot where the field mouse trots, and to shake the tattered arras woven with a silent motto. In my beginning is my end. Now the night falls across the open field, leaving the deep lane shuttered with branches, dark in the afternoon, where you lean against a bank while a van passes, and the deep lane insists on the direction into the village, in the electric heat hypnotized. In a warm haze the sultry light is absorbed, not refracted by grey stone. The dahlias sleep in the empty silence, wait for the early owl. In that open field, if you do not come too close, on a summer midnight you can hear the music of the wheat pipe and the little drum, and see them dancing around the bonfire, the association of man and woman in dancing, signifying matrimony, a dignified and commodious sacrament. Two and two, necessary conjunction, holding each other by the hand or the arm which betokeneth concord. Round and round the fire, leaping through the flames or joined in circles, rustically solemn or in rustic laughter, lifting heavy feet in clumsy shoes, earth feet, lone feet, lifted in country mirth, mirth of those long since under earth, nourishing the corn, keeping time, keeping the rhythm in their dancing, as in their living in the living seasons, the time of the seasons and the constellations, the time of milking and the time of harvest, the time of the coupling of man and woman, and that of beasts, feet rising and falling, eating and drinking, dung and death. Dawn points, and another day prepares for heat and silence. Out at sea the dawn wind wrinkles and slides. I am here or there or elsewhere in my beginning.
Okay, what do you guys think? What kind of imagery do you feel, do you recognize in this? And what might it have to do with culture?
I mean, there's a lot of
Hugh?
fertility image. Well, I mean, matrimony, and he's talking about the seasons changing, the time of the coupling of man and women, of milking, and the time of harvest.
Yeah, so Ecclesiastes, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if he's. You said, what does that have to do with culture? Is that what you said?
It's okay. I mean, we don't have to deal with it yet, but I want to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, some kind of rebirth of sorts.
Okay, what do we notice about what's happening here? So we're in a village. We're in East Coker. What are the people like? You guys get a sense of that?
I mean, they're kind of agricultural people.
Okay.
Seems. Rustic laughter. They're nourishing the corn. I mean, they're farmers
Yeah. So these are not the kind of people we're going to run into.
in the wasteland.
Yeah. No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
But we're also not going to run into them on Fifth Avenue.
Yeah.
Right? That's not okay. So we're talking about pretty down home people here, real people. Right? Okay. Go ahead, you.
I mean, I was. Yeah, I don't know how many other thoughts I have. I also got a little bit of the imagism too. I don't know if he's. Did we already talk about this a lot with Eliot?
We talked just a little bit. Go ahead.
In the context of home, though, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if is he reading. I'm trying to remember if he said he and home have an affinity for each other, if they're friends.
Yeah.
Is that the case?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That was a sort of. I just felt the sort of indication of imagism as he's telling us.
Yeah, we think they knew each other, but we don't have evidence. Definitely, we know that Eliot had a huge respect for home. Yeah. So he adopts that. Okay, what else, guys? Let's talk about what's going on with nature here. Addison?
I mean, there seems to be a real sense of like the cycle, the growing
Okay.
cycle, the harvest cycle,
Yeah.
which would make sense if this is like a rural farming community.
Right.
And even in the beginning, when it's like, in my beginning is my end, like houses rise and fall.
Yeah.
And it's talking about kind of just like the cycle of like growth and destruction and like how that's kind of a natural thing. And
Yes.
people seem really comfortable with that. Which you would be if you're in a farming community. You see
Okay.
life and death.
What's the cycle have to do with religion? Yeah, Maria?
It's liturgical.
Yeah, right, absolutely. So the cycle is not just natural, it's liturgical. And again, think about, all right, if the cult is the beginning of all things, then there's an interplay between farm life and the fact that every year we come back to Advent and Christmas and Lent and Easter, and we do it all over again. Just like there's a spring, summer, fall, winter, there's also Advent, Christmas, Lent, and Easter. Right? So we're doing it all over again. That's the cult and the culture. So the cycles, the seasons, Ecclesiastes, there's a time for this and a time for that. We see all of that. But notice, what does he say about marriage? What do we associate? This is at the top of 124. Right? The association of man and woman in dancing, signifying matrimony. And notice the old language there, right? The Middle English. A dignified and commodious sacrament. But it's a sacrament, right? It's a sacrament. And that matters. It's dignified. It's commodious. And what is it? It's 2 by 2. But of course, that's necessary. Well, what else is 2 by 2? It's not just marriage. Aren't we supposed to go forth into the world 2 by 2 and baptize in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost? Right? So, again, Eliot he's doing a great job. An amazing, great job. That's the understatement of the year. He is beautifully showing that the religious life and the natural life are not separate from one another. They enhance one another overall. Does that make sense for everyone? So that's that beauty. Okay, good.
What is the late November doing with the disturbance of the spring, and creatures of the summer heat and snowdrops writhing under feet, and hollyhocks that aim too high, red into grey and tumble down, late roses filled with early snow. Thunder rolled by the rolling stars simulates triumphal cars deployed in constellated wars. Scorpion fights against the sun until the sun and moon go down. Comets weep and Leonids fly, hunt the heavens and the plains, whirled in a vortex that shall bring the world to that destructive fire which burns before the ice cap rains. That was a way of putting it, not very satisfactory. A paraphrastic study in a worn-out poetical fashion, leaving one still with the intolerable wrestle with words and meanings. The poetry does not matter. It was not, to start again, what one had expected. What was to be the value of the long looked forward to, long hoped for calm, the autumnal serenity and the wisdom of age? Had they deceived us, or deceived themselves, the quiet-voiced elders, bequeathing us merely a receipt for deceit, the serenity only a deliberate habitude, the wisdom only the knowledge of dead secrets, useless in the darkness into which they peered or from which they turned their eyes? There is, it seems to us, at best, only a limited value in the knowledge derived from experience. The knowledge imposes a pattern and falsifies, for the pattern is new in every moment, and every moment is a new and shocking valuation of all we have been. We are only undeceived of that which, deceiving, could no longer harm. In the middle, not only in the middle of the way, but all the way in a dark wood, in a bramble, on the edge of a grimpen, where is no secure foothold, and menaced by monsters, fancy lights, risking enchantment. Do not let me hear of the wisdom of old men, but rather of their folly, their fear of fear and frenzy, their fear of possession, of belonging to another or to others or to God. The only wisdom we can hope to acquire is the wisdom of humility. Humility is endless. The houses are all gone under the sea. The dancers are all gone under the hill.
Okay, that's a hard one. This is a very hard one. Do you guys catch what Eliot's doing here? It's a caution. What do we not want? Think about the farmers. Think about the cycle. Addison?
I mean, he seems to be unsatisfied with the ability of like poetry and words.
Okay, to
that
describe.
accurately describe
Mhm.
because like he goes in a couple stanzas trying to describe like the cycle, and then he's like, this wasn't satisfactory because
Okay.
you're still wrestling with what it means, even if you can describe it.
Yeah, okay, that's good. What would be the problem, for example, of making Halloween harvest a holy day? Maria?
Because it's kind of pagan.
Yeah, this is the problem, right? We need to see nature, and harvest is good, but we don't worship harvest, right? And this is where Eliot, and he's always very good on this, we should be traditionalists. We should never worship traditionalism, because that is obviously devoid of Christian meaning. So it's not enough to look at the pagan and stop. The pagan has to be baptized. It has to be made good. So why is Halloween a good night? Because it's the night before All Saints' Day. That's why it's good. Not because Halloween is good, but it's the evening before All Hallows, the day before All Saints. And so we can recognize it, but it has to be baptized. And if we divorce that, we lose something very seriously. Now, I'll also point this out, and again, we know more about this one poem from Eliot than we know about a lot of others. He's being playful here too, right? So right in the middle, tradition is not always, that is on the middle of page 125, right? Tradition is not always good, right? We've got to be careful about that. If it's tradition without faith, it's bad. And in fact, the wisdom only the knowledge of dead secrets. Right? It becomes Gnosticism if we're not rooted in the faith. But now he's being playful. In the middle, look at that, that's about, 6, 7 lines from the bottom? In the middle, not only the middle of the way, well, that's straight out of Dante, right? And notice what happens then. And again, Eliot's having fun here with us. He's not, we think of him as this ultra serious poet, but he's having a good time. But all the way in a dark wood in a bramble on the edge of a grimpen where there is no secure foothold. Well, this is out of Arthur Conan Doyle's Hound of the Baskervilles, one of the Sherlock Holmes stories. So Eliot's really being playful about this. And I love that. I hope you guys like that too. I just love that. That would be, at the time Eliot's writing, this would be like me quoting Harry Potter in the middle of a serious poem. That's what he's doing at that point. So he's having a very good time in doing all of this. Okay, guys ready? Next.
Oh, dark, dark, dark. They all go into the dark, the vacant interstellar spaces, the vacant into the vacant. The captains, merchant bankers, eminent men of letters, the generous patrons of art, the statesmen and the rulers, distinguished civil servants, chairmen of many committees, industrial lords and petty contractors, all go into the dark, and dark the sun and moon, and the almanac de Gotha, and the stock exchange gazette, the directory of directors, and cold the sense and lost the motive of action. And we all go with them into the silent funeral, nobody's funeral, for there is no one to bury. I said to my soul, be still, and let the dark come upon you, which shall be the darkness of God. As in a theatre, the lights are extinguished, for the scene to be changed with a hollow rumble of wings, with a movement of darkness on darkness, and we know that the hills and the trees, the distant panorama, and the bold imposing facade are all being rolled away. Or as as when an underground train in the tube stops too long between stations, and the conversation rises and slowly fades into silence, and you see behind every face the mental emptiness deepen, leaving only the growing terror of nothing to think about. Or when, under ether, the mind is conscious but conscious of nothing, I said to my soul, be still, and wait without hope, for hope would be hope for the wrong thing. Wait without love, for love would be love of the wrong thing. There is yet faith, but the faith and the love and the hope are all in the waiting. Wait without thought, for you are not ready for thought. So the darkness shall be the light and the stillness the dancing. Whisper of running streams and winter lightning, the wild time unseen and the wild strawberry, the laughter in the garden, echoed ecstasy, not lost, but requiring, pointing to the agony of death and birth. You say I am repeating something I have said before. I shall say it again. Shall I say it again? In order to arrive there, to arrive where you are, to get from where you are not, you must go by a way wherein there is no ecstasy. In order to arrive at what you do not know, you must go by a way which is the way of ignorance. In order to possess what you do not possess, you must go by the way of dispossession. In order to arrive at what you are not, you must go through the way in which you are not. And what you do not know is the only thing you know, and what you own is what you do not own, and where you are is where you are not.
Okay, how about that one, guys? Let's just take this, let's break it down for a moment. In order to possess what you do not possess, you must by the way of dispossession. Think about that for a moment. Where have you heard something like that before?
It's very Christocentric to me.
Okay, talk about
Yeah,
that.
I mean, he who wants to, find his life, like, will have to lose it. Glory requires sacrifice, and the cross is the only means by which you can attain glory.
Okay, can you think of a specific, and I'm probably being too hard on this, but can you think of a specific scriptural reference that sounds like that, but not quite?
Which line specifically in the text?
I'm thinking in particular, in order to possess what you do not possess, you must go by the way of dispossession.
Yeah, they're all kind of blending together. Right
That's
now.
okay.
I mean,
That's
there's
okay.
definitely one.
How about blessed are the poor, they shall inherit the earth. Right? This is a play on the Beatitudes. Right? And interestingly enough, do you guys know Jesus is not the author of the Beatitudes? Jesus is repeating what an old Pharisee had said. Do you guys know who the Pharisee is? It's an interesting guy. Really interesting guy. His name is Hillel. Hillel. And a lot of times if you go to Jewish centers on American campuses, they'll often be called the Hillel Center, named after him. Hillel was the greatest of the Pharisees. And a good guy, right? A real good guy. And we think that Jesus probably saw him preach when Jesus was a little boy. They wouldn't have overlapped that much, except Jesus would have been a kid. But to meet Hillel would be, for us, like to meet one of the great intellectuals of our day, right? To meet George Will, maybe, or some other really famous, or Jordan Peterson, or Hillel had that kind of stature. And he loved playing with paradoxes. So, if you do this, and it doesn't always quite fit. It's like, wait a minute, how did you get from there to there? Because the Beatitudes are tough. They're hard, but they're gorgeous. Right? They're absolutely gorgeous. So we see that as well. Okay, how about at the beginning of part 3? Oh, dark, dark, dark. They all go into the dark. We're clearly not in a village now. Unless this is modern East Coker, rather than the East Coker of the Puritan age. Who's he talking about? Civil servants, chairmen of many committees, industrial lords. What do you guys think he's criticizing? And he's criticizing. wouldn't this just be kind of an attack on modernity? All of these people who think they know what they're doing?
Yeah, I'm even thinking about how you said he got so fed up with the people at Harvard that he didn't get his degree.
Yeah.
But like this kind of entrenched bureaucracy distinguishes, like it's just become, they've kind of lost the meaning of it all.
Yeah. So what are we to take? Even these pagan farmers know what they're doing better than some CEO, because at least they live with nature. They may worship it falsely, but they live with it. Some CEO is just taken with his own ingenuity, right? He's not thinking about God or other things. And so that's why, okay, then, and I hope you guys caught the reference to Plato's cave as well, right? I said to my soul, be still and let the dark come upon you, which shall be the darkness of God, right? It's very much a Platonic kind of idea in all of this. But, okay, now we get to, I'm going to play the whole thing from right now to the end. We get to a very, very beautiful part of the Four Quartets. So we've had paganism, Gnosticism, craziness of modernity, and now we find the solution to all of this. And you guys think again in terms of imagism. Think of imagery here and what all of this means.
The wounded surgeon flies the steel that questions the distempered part. Beneath the bleeding hands we feel the sharp compassion of the healer's art, resolving the enigma of the fevered chart. Our only health is a disease if we obey the dying nurse, whose constant care is not to please but to remind of our and Adam's curse, and that to be restored our sickness must grow worse. The whole earth is our hospital, endowed by the ruined millionaire, wherein, if we do well, we shall die of the absolute paternal care that will not leave us, but prevents us everywhere. The chill ascends from feet to knees, the fever sings in mental wires. If to be warm, then I must freeze and quake in frigid purgatorial fires, of which the flame is roses and the smoke is briars. The dripping blood, our only drink, the bloody flesh, our only food, in spite of which we like to think that we are sound, substantial flesh and blood. Again, in spite of that, we call this Friday good. So here I am, in the middle way, having had 20 years largely wasted, the years of l'entre deux guerres, trying to learn to use words, and every attempt is a wholly new start and a different kind of failure, because one has only learnt to get the better of words for the thing one no longer has to say, or the way in which one is no longer disposed to say it. And so each venture is a new beginning, a raid on the inarticulate with shabby equipment always deteriorating, in the general mess of imprecision of feeling, undisciplined squads of emotion, and what there is to conquer, by strength and submission, has already been discovered once or twice or several times, by men whom one cannot hope to emulate. But there is no competition. There is only the fight to recover what has been lost and found and lost again and again, and now, under conditions that seem unpropitious, but perhaps neither gain nor loss. For us, there is only the trying. The rest is not our business. Home is where one starts from. As we grow older, the world becomes stranger, the pattern more complicated of dead and living. Not the intense moment, isolated with no before and after, but a lifetime burning in every moment, and not the lifetime of one man only, but of old stones that cannot be deciphered. There is a time for the evening under starlight, a time for the evening under lamplight, the evening with the photograph album. Love is most nearly itself when here and now cease to matter. Old men ought to be explorers. Here and there does not matter. We must be still and still moving into another intensity for a further union, a deeper communion. Through the dark, cold, and empty desolation, the wave cry, the wind cry, the vast waters of the petrel and the porpoise. In my end is my beginning.
Okay. I want you guys to love this so much. It's actually makes my heart ache. I want you guys to love this. I mean, just think about the lines. Love is most nearly itself when here and now cease to matter. Have you ever been in a moment like that? Where you're just so taken with your friend or the person you've fallen in love with, or with a song or a good run or a poem, and you don't even need to think, I love this, because you're so totally wrapped up in it. Right? It is who you are at that moment. And think about everything that Eliot has told us up to this point. Don't rely on the ecstasy. Now he's telling us, totally rely on the ecstasy. Right? But why? Did you guys catch this? Why can we do that? Why can we now do that? We couldn't do it with the pagan farmers. We couldn't do it with modern men. But what's happened? What happens in part 4?
Jesus.
Why? Tell me, Drew.
Crucifixion.
Okay, we definitely see that, right? How about before that? Just right there, right at the beginning of part 4, on page 127. Who's the wounded surgeon? Who fixes us, guys? It's Christ. He's the wounded surgeon, right? That questions the distempered part. Beneath the bleeding hands, we feel the sharp compassion of the healer's art, resolving the enigma of the fever chart. Right? Jesus makes us whole, but he does it wounded. He's got holes in his hands. He's got holes in his feet. He's got holes in the side of his body. He has just taken on all the sin that has ever existed. And yet he still loves us so much. He cares more about us than himself. Right? He is the surgeon. And how about this? Our only health is the disease if we obey the dying nurse, whose constant care is not to please, but to remind of our and Adam's curse. Well, what is that? You guys ever heard this saying that if you're in the middle of church and the chairs are comfortable, you're not learning anything worth learning? Pews are supposed to hurt you. Kneelers are supposed to hurt you. Why?
No one is ever holy without suffering.
Yeah, absolutely. And what are we told? Right? If the priest or the minister starts telling us, oh, well, if you do this and this, you'll have a good life. Man, run like mad. That's not what church is about. Church is about reminding us that someone died for our sins. Right? That's what it's about, that we do nothing except accept his mercy. That's all it is. And so the dying nurse, it's the church. Right? We resent it. We hate it at times. But it tells us what we need to know. Has it failed? Yeah, it's dying. We don't think of the church right now, in 2026, do we think of the Christian church as the most viable institution in society? Of course not. It's dying. And yet it's still telling us the truth. And it doesn't matter if it comes down to just 12 of us again. It may. But it doesn't matter. The church tells us the truth. And so, Drew, this is what I assume you were getting at. And I love this. I mean, some of this, the language here is incredible. The dripping blood our only drink, the bloody flesh our only food, in spite of which we like to think that we are sound, substantial flesh and blood, and in spite of that, we call this Friday good. Right? What gives us the right to call it Good Friday? We didn't earn any of that. Nothing. The whole point is we don't earn that. It's earned by Christ getting on the cross and dying. And yet we have the presumption to call it Good Friday. Right? That's what a scandal that we do that. I mean, and I hope you guys see that this is just so beautiful what Eliot is doing here in all of this. And then you guys think about everything we've been reading in Chesterton and look at the last few lines on 128. There is only the fight to recover what has been lost, and found and lost again and again, and now under conditions that seem unpropitious. But perhaps neither gain nor loss. For us there is only the trying. The rest is not our business. Right? What's Eliot saying here? Anybody jump in on this?
Yeah, it's Chesterton's thesis of we're going to fight the battle, and we're going to win. We have won the war already. I mean, stanza 4 tells you that.
Yeah.
But we continue to fight the battle and wage kind of against powers that are outside of our control. But we all have, we've all been given a duty to fight a fight, whether it seems like we're losing. I mean, the same with the church. The church might seem like it's becoming kind of impoverished, but we have trust and hope that it will continue to live on.
Absolutely. And think about conservatism. You're conserving stuff that people have forgotten. That's the whole point. Right? So of course they're going to keep forgetting, and of course we're going to keep reminding. That's our job as conservatives, to do that, to keep reminding them of timeless truths. So I love this, guys. I hope you do too. But I think this is so powerful. And these last two sections, 4 and 5 here, again, I'll just be autobiographical. These have given me immense comfort in times of distress in my adult life. Just reading through that again and being reminded, I posted I post all my lectures. And I don't know if you guys ever read the comments on YouTube. Don't ever read them. They're so bad. But here, we did one of our talks in here where I went on for like an hour and 15 minutes about how modernity is empty and it does all this. And the comment was, doesn't Berzer seem infantile? And at first I was kind of hurt by that. And then I thought, who cares? I had an hour and 15 minutes to say what I wanted. Some guy can say I'm infantile. That's his choice, right? But what are we doing? What are you guys doing? What are we doing? We're just remembering again and again what's been forgotten, right? That's the whole point overall. Okay, I took you guys over. Sorry about that. But good stuff, I think. Really great stuff. All right, so the dry salvages. We'll get to that next week. All right, and you guys have fun with Canticle. Just remember, it's naughty and witty and hilarious all at the same time. It's mischievous. It's a very mischievous novel. So,